I'm joined once again, happily to say, by Ian Bailey, Ottawa reporter with the Globe and Mail, as well as Stephanie Levitz, political reporter with the Toronto Star, Nick Taylor-Vaisey, reporter with Politico's Ottawa Playbook. Hello to the three of you once again.
How are you doing?
Hello. I'm good. Good. It's it's been very busy. We haven't. This is really probably the very first time. We had earlier today Peter MacKay's speech on CPAC, but really the first big event of the night, as I was saying with Esther. But I want to talk about the excitement that we keep hearing in the room from Conservative members. Of course, the polls have them now leading in every region of the country except Quebec, where we are right now. But they are very buoyed when you speak to the people gathered here. So with that in mind, and as we count down to Pierre Poilievre's address to the members here, what do you think the party leader has to do? What does he need to accomplish with this speech tonight? Stephanie, I'll begin with you.
One of the things we can expect him to do is continue to broaden his message to the party, to give them more details, more ideas, more energy, really, to take out of this room, take back to their riding associations, take back to their organizations, to continue signing up new members, to continue raising money, and to remain focused on their main goal. I think one of the things that has been interesting in this convention is the extent to which it's very scripted, Michael. They keep hammering the same themes, the same messages. What Pierre Poilievre has to do in a way is take all of that and break through a little more for the membership, re-energize them as energized as they are, but still continue to be new, be exciting, give some momentum coming out of this, because things like the policy resolutions, the constitutional resolutions, they aren't the thing that necessarily bring the momentum. It's Mr. Poilievre that brings the momentum.
Mm-hmm. Ian, what would you say to that?
I think, Mr. Poilievre needs to keep the ball rolling. The ball that's sort of brought the Conservatives to where they are now, high in the polls, good in fundraising, planning more ads, everything going well. He has to keep that ball rolling. He has to avoid gaffes and such. And I think it's important to note that, for Canadians who watch these kind of events, this is a big platform for him tonight. Largest platform perhaps since his speech the night he won. We've seen Mr. Poilievre on Parliament Hill. He's been seen in rallies and obviously in news clips here and there, but he tonight will have the floor. And I agree with Stephanie. He may not want to open a big new rhetorical angle because everything's gone so well, but maybe he will. And I guess those are some of the things he's probably trying to accomplish here tonight.
Yeah, it's interesting as you say that, because of course his first big speech was when he won the leadership vote a year ago. Yeah. But of course he was competing at that time with the death of the Queen, yeah. And added on to that, these poll numbers certainly, I would argue, makes more Canadians curious about Pierre Poilievre. Of course, we know him very well. It's our job to know him well, and we cover him in Ottawa. But for people right across the country who are not as familiar, I'm sure those numbers are piquing some interest. So Nick, what do you say about the kind of task ahead of the leader right now and what he has to accomplish?
Well, I think the one thing we know about Conservative conventions and the Conservative Party, a lot of different kinds of Conservatives fill these seats. They care about different policies. Some of them are here just to debate the constitution of the party because they're really into governance. They're really into transparent nomination races and the sort of nitty-gritty of getting ready for that next campaign. And the challenge that two of Pierre Poilievre's predecessors as leader had was speaking to all of those Conservatives in a way where they were all listening and they all felt heard and they all felt like they were on the same page, truly united. Actually, they would all talk about being united, but of course we know in caucus they were grumbling to each other, and in policy debates at conventions they'd be grumbling, and then that grumbling would spill out. But it seems like Poilievre has found the basic messages that speak to all of those people, and the basic approach to speaking to Conservatives across the country in a way where they do all feel like, even though he's kind of saying basically the same thing, versions of the same thing, everybody feels like they're part of this party. So that gives him, I think, license to have a little fun tonight, break open a bit out of the axe the tax rhetoric. I'm sure he'll say that plenty of times, but sort of maybe riff a few jokes and hope that maybe that breaks through to a broader Canadian audience who happens to be watching. But as we know, the broader Canadian audience isn't so much watching the convention as much as they will be watching an election whenever that does come.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. You talk about the different types of Conservatives here. And when you say that, I think about Aaron O'Toole, I think about Andrew Scheer, because the wings of the party, even in the midst of a campaign, were tearing at the campaign in the back rooms, which of course affected the final outcome. But there have been some contentious policy issues raised. We were not allowed in the room, yes. But we know from what was published that they were addressing issues, for example, trans rights, issues that would appeal more towards traditionally social conservatives than perhaps, say, a fiscal conservative. Where does that now sit for the party? If those wings of the party were tearing at it in the midst of the campaign, where does that sit right now? Where did social conservatives sit within this Pierre Poilievre Conservative Party, do you think?
Well, I think Mr. Poilievre has not repudiated that wing. He knows that wing is part of the foundation of the party that's brought him to where he is now, that'll take him to the next step, take him into the next election. So he's not repudiating them. He's speaking very gingerly about their concerns, and they're still inside the tent going forward.
Okay, what do you say to that, Stephanie?
I say one thing to watch will be the coming nomination races for candidates in ridings not currently held by Conservatives across the country. We saw, maybe your viewers remember, maybe they don't, a hotly contested nomination race in the riding of Oxford, where it was believed that a candidate who espoused some anti-abortion views was deliberately disqualified because of their point of view. There's an argument that that actually wasn't the case. However, I know that the social conservative wing of the party is watching very carefully to see how Mr. Poilievre handles that and how he manages their ability to voice and speak their concerns within the party. We saw these debates happen today. They did happen behind closed doors. Those debates will now spill over onto the plenary floor tomorrow. And it will be interesting to see, in turn, how Mr. Poilievre chooses to respond to what comes up. He has to, rightfully for him, be seen to be listening. It doesn't mean he has to agree. It just means he has to listen.
Well, and he noted that going into this convention, even before it began, the fact that he's not obliged to actually add anything that comes out of these policy debates into an eventual conservative platform. But Nick, where does the social conservative voice sit right now, do you think?
Well, I think they do feel heard. We don't get to, again, watch or hear, but they are hotly debating a raft of policies. But I think it's worth pointing out that they have that ability to do that behind closed doors, but the party's structure for debating policy and then presenting it on the convention floor is relatively strict. There are a limited number of policies that come to the convention, 60, and then of the 20 that are divided into 3 different policy breakout rooms, only 10 in each can come to the floor, so that's 30 total. But you have to pass that bar, and caucus members, they get to express a view, which will have some influence, and then we'll see what happens on the floor itself. But there is a bit of an obstacle course that if you're a conservative, grassroots conservative activist who wants to see that policy come into fruition eventually, maybe one day in government, it's a long road from conception at a meeting in your riding to getting here, passing here, and then persuading the party to actually run on it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So a lot to watch still, as you say, tomorrow in particular when it goes to plenary. But beyond that, another form of conservative, type of conservative might be, for example, Peter MacKay, former leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, the co-founder of this party some 20 years ago. He gave a speech during the noon hour, local time here in Quebec City, to the members here. Why do you think it was important to hear from Peter MacKay? You know, he was, to my understanding, a late add-on, but I still wonder about that decision to invite him to speak. Why do you think that was important for party organizers?
Mr. MacKay has a certain kind of star quality. Occurred watching him speak, and maybe there was a bit of an expectation that he might announce or confirm that he was coming back into politics, which would have been a very interesting.
He teased it, but didn't give anything.
But he pulled off. And he's, obviously Mr. MacKay was a co-founder of this current conservative movement, but he has progressive conservative roots in sort of that community, which is always perhaps a small community in this current Conservative Party. Maybe it was a bit of an outreach to them as well. So all of these things, maybe made him someone worth having. Certainly, I was curious to see what he would say, and the room was full, and people were waiting, and parts of that speech were quite good.
Yeah, the room was actually quite full with Peter MacKay, and he actually received a great reception. People standing up, giving him a big round of applause. Stephanie, do you think it was important for Peter MacKay to be a part of this gathering?
It's been interesting to me. You noted it's been 20 years since the parties merged. That date is coming up quite rapidly. It's October when the agreement in principle was signed. And I've been reflecting on where do we see the history of the party come to fore in this convention. 20 years seems like a good milestone. And there was Peter MacKay to sort of speak to where this party has come from. Mr. Poilievre has really become the heir apparent to Stephen Harper. There's a lot of comparisons that are made between Mr. Poilievre, Mr. Harper, how Mr. Harper helps him. We heard a lot about Mr. Harper's continued role in fundraising. The party still supports its own roots. Peter MacKay was a founding partner of all of this as well, and I think to highlight that, showcase the history of the party, is important to the party to remember where they've come from and where they need to go.
Okay, Nick, very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of that's true, and what I thought was interesting was he's starting to adopt the language of Pierre Poilievre. So this is Peter MacKay, the leader from 20 years ago, speaking a different sort of, to a different audience and using different rhetoric and running on different policies, but now he's speaking Poilievre's language.
Yeah, that was interesting to watch. Listen, I have less than 2 minutes, so I need a quick round out here, because we keep noting how well Conservatives are doing in the polls, but are they peaking too early? You know, if this Liberal NDP supply and confidence agreement holds, we are 2 years away from a vote. How challenging is that going to be? What do Conservatives have to do here? You know, and I'll go down the line beginning with you.
Keep the momentum and resist the scrutiny and respond to the scrutiny that's going to come as people reflect on what a Conservative government would mean.
Okay, Stephanie?
Mr. Poilievre told his MPs yesterday, don't take this for granted. Ignore the polls, head down, keep working, don't get lazy. And that is the message for the party. They have to keep working. The election could be tomorrow, could also be in 2 years, and he's trying to make his MPs at minimum. And I think the party as a whole very aware of that they just have to keep putting in the work.
Nick?
Yeah, I spoke to an MP who said exactly how you phrased the question. He said, we're peaking too early. We're peaking too early. Don't talk anymore about this. We're going to jinx it. And I think that's not a strange view in this hall.
Okay, well, we are watching closely, as we always do. Ian, Stephanie, Nick, thank you very much for the time.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot.